my final breath.
Spring 2020 saw the Covid-19 global pandemic taking hold in the United Kingdom, and we began to grieve around the nation, alongside the thousands of families around the world facing the tragic loss of a loved one. Over the past 38 years of making music together, the All Souls Orchestra has become a family, and we too have resonated with the loss of a dearly loved member of that family. On the 12th of May 2020, on his 52nd birthday, bass player Pete Hart took his final breath in East Surrey Hospital after 4 weeks of wrestling with the virus on a ventilator in ICU. Peter worked at the hospital as a paramedic and was committed to serving others. It was clear from the outpouring on social media by friends and strangers alike that his warmth and dedication had a far-reaching impact. To the orchestra, he was Pete, the gentle giant with a cheeky grin and sense of fun, whose good nature drew in old stager and newcomer alike. Pete was part of the All Souls Orchestra family for over 30 years, joining in the 80s when fellow King's College student Jonathan Cox introduced him.
I remember back in the 1980s, I was a student at King's College London, and it was there that I met Peter Hart, a fellow student with a mutual interest in music. At that time I was also involved with the All Souls Orchestra, and I remember at one of the rehearsals for a prom praise in the Albert Hall, we were desperately short of double bass players, and I just wondered if Peter Hart, that student at college, might be interested to join us. So I mentioned it to him. It's a Christian event, I said, but you needn't let that put you off. You might really enjoy it, and they're a great bunch of people. And anyway, we'll be playing to a packed Royal Albert Hall. Well, Pete did show up for the rehearsal and stayed on for the performance. And I was really pleased to hear the following week at uni that he'd really enjoyed it. I was even more encouraged to see him show up to play in the orchestra for evening services and future prom praises, and evidently to see him growing in his faith as well.
In no time, Pete was part of the family. And then came the day when, across a crowded orchestra, increasing glances were exchanged between Pete and flute player Helen, and a love story that lasted 28 years has begun. Together as their children Lauren, Daniel and Ellie grew, they remained at the heart of the orchestra family ever since.
We actually met over 30 years ago at All Souls, and we immediately became very good friends, and in fact we were married within a year of each other.
We grew in friendship and closeness over the years, and we had much fun together with All Souls Orchestra. Many years of fun and games on tour, and of course Pete was a real ringleader in those. And our kids grew up together and knew each other very well. We're very close as a foursome and very close as two families together. We feast on many a barbecue with our kids with stories of All Souls Orchestra days.
Then came the time when Pete took the brave step of giving up a lucrative job in the City of London to retrain as a paramedic. To all who knew him, it just made sense. As Helen has said, he was just always wanting to offer a hand. He wanted to serve others. He didn't talk much about his faith. He lived it. So it was while working on the front lines at East Surrey Hospital that Pete was infected by the coronavirus and was taken into ICU, where his colleagues and friends began to treat him, and where, despite their massive efforts, Pete took his final breath. Another member of the orchestra, clarinetist Philip Taylor, also works as a paramedic at East Surrey and joined his other colleagues in the memorial service.
Hundreds of people turned out. There was a guard of honour, and I was very privileged to participate in that, lining the route that the family walked through to get to the grass area where the service was led. And there was a final radio announcement broadcast over the ambulance radios, telling Pete that it was time for him to stand down. His shift was done.
Obviously, it was a horrific, horrendous time, and I don't know how Helen got through. Well, I do know how Helen got through, and the family is because of God. And because he held them up and he held them together, and he was their rock, and he still is, and he will be always. And I know that In Christ Alone was a very favourite song of Pete's, and Helen would play it in his earpiece when she was allowed in. And I know it was one of the last things that he heard. I have a picture of him beaming while playing his bass in Christ Alone. And I know Helen wanted him to be playing at his own funeral. And so they played a short excerpt of the piece, the orchestral arrangement of In Christ Alone. And Pete was playing on it at his own funeral.
In Christ alone, my hope is found. He is my light, my strength, my song. This cornerstone, this solid ground, firm through the fiercest drought and storm. What heights of love, what depths of peace, when fears are still, what striving cease, my comforter. My all in all, here in the love of Christ I stand. In Christ alone, who took on flesh, fullness of God in helpless babe, this gift of love and righteousness, scorned by the ones he came to save.